Welcome back to the Taiwan Outlook. I'm Raymond Wu. In this segment, we will continue our conversation with Mr. Alan Romberg, formerly a deputy spokesperson for the U.S. State Department and currently a distinguished fellow and also the director of East Asian program at the Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. Alan, we understand that President Obama and his administration confronted with a very formidable task ahead. Not only the global financial crisis, but also how to stimulate the economy, because America remains the engine of growth for global economy. If America doesn't recover in time, I think the rest of the world will suffer that much more. And also with discussion about alternative energy plans for the U.S., the solar power, wind power, and then other issues. The list just goes on, and it's not something that people will envy that he's his job and his team has to face. But the fact of the matter remains is there's only so much time and so little resources available, and he needs to deliver at least on some of the pledges that he has made during the campaign. How would you think, as an individual observer of American politics, how would you think that he will prioritize the policy objectives that's confronting himself and also his administration?
I think clearly the number one priority is going to be to re-stimulate the American economy, to bring the financial crisis under control, get the lending markets going again, and at the same time not ignore the fact that housing is a big part of
it, yes.
And the effect on individuals, both in terms of their housing and their jobs. This is really, I think, at the heart of what he's going to have to do. He has combined his concerns, for example, about energy with concern about jobs by pointing out that under his plan, he thinks he can put a lot of Americans to work on new technologies.
Okay.
But of course, it also takes a lot of money to invest in those new technologies. And so, going back to a point we were discussing earlier, how the limitations of the financial crisis will impact his policies remains to be seen. It's very clear when he was asked during the campaign, for example, well, what are you going to cut? Because you can't do it all.
Exactly.
He's very reluctant to give up anything.
Specifics.
So I think that it wasn't just not being specific. I think he really believes these things work together and reinforce each other. So we'll have to see. But clearly, again, stimulating the economy, getting it moving again, getting people back to work, and making sure they can hold on to their homes, I think will be his top priorities. But that doesn't mean he'll be ignoring the other things at all.
But what you mentioned about the housing market was very important, because I remember Mr. Obama said that just weeks ago that if we don't save the housing market, there goes the American dream. Things, so he does realize that, that is important. But how do you restore the confidence for institutions to lend, mortgages, to lend money to businesses, to individuals, to families, so they can afford a home, a house, and how can that, be restored in terms of the confidence?
Yeah, of course, I speak as a non-economist. But I think that getting the financial institutions in a position where they are willing to lend to one another, or the bank lending and so on and so forth, and they're assured that they've got the resources to do that, is very important. So there are people who say you're putting too much priority to Obama and even to the Bush administration. You're putting too much emphasis on the banks. But the fact is, if you don't do something about the financial institutions, you cannot, in fact, get these programs going in terms of mortgages and new lending and new housing and all the rest of it. So how to do that, I couldn't begin to say with any confidence, but I think that is what needs to be done. That this freeze on lending really has frozen the entire economy in a way.
Yeah. And also, let's now shift to focus onto foreign policy.
Sure.
We understand in the past 8 years under George W. Bush, the American standing has been, to say the least, very controversial on some of the issues around the world. How would you think that President Obama and his national security team will try to salvage or repair the American standing and image on international stage?
I think there are two things to think about. One is substance, and the other is, if you will, process. But in any case, how to interact with others. On substance, one has to think that there will be many areas where an Obama administration will actually not be so different from a Bush administration.
Okay.
North
example?
Korea policy,
Okay.
for example, where the objective of total denuclearization of North Korea
That will remain.
will remain, and so will the insistence that this not be a partial denuclearization. That doesn't mean it can be done quickly,
Okay.
but the goal isn't going to change there.
Okay.
I think in terms of relations with the People's Republic of China,
Of course.
there will continue to be a strong emphasis on having a constructive and cooperative relationship with China, while obviously in areas such as trade or in areas where we have some differences, working with China, trying to persuade it to move in a different direction if that's what we need, or to negotiate with us on an appropriate basis. But I think in terms of if what I'm calling process may not be quite the right word, but consultation, respecting the views of others, not appearing anyway as a hegemon, but rather as a leader.
Okay.
And I think leadership means also active listening and taking into account in a very serious way, not just thank you for your views, I'll now go do what I want to do, but taking into account a serious way what others think and others want and others need. And I think that through the campaign it became very clear that this is a high priority for Mr. Obama.
Okay.
And I think this will very definitely inform all of his relationships.
Will we see necessarily the end of U.S. unilateralism in foreign policy?
In general, I would say the answer to that is yes, but I
Okay.
think one does need to keep in mind that if there is a vital issue
Okay.
where the United States feels it needs to act and it is not able to persuade others to act with it, I'm sure that any U.S. leader would say, I have to reserve the right to do what I think I need to do. Bill Clinton,
Yes.
there was a saying in that administration, with others if we can, alone if we must. And that the alone if we must is obviously not either a desirable,
It's not a preferred choice. No.
nor I think is it something one needs to do very frequently. So I basically would say I think that the tone of this administration will be quite different, and
Okay.
will be perceived as quite different.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, I think that the emphasis will be on leadership rather than on telling other people what to do.
How about the war on terror? We know that that has been a dominant, overriding concern under President Bush. Will that continue, or how will the tactics or strategy be different?
I don't think anybody's going to relax about the possibility of global terrorism. But there are ways and ways of attacking it. And obviously, for example, I think there's a common sense around the United States, and certainly one Mr. Obama has, that going into Iraq was not the best way of trying to deal with terrorism. On the other hand, he has emphasized that Afghanistan, which is the seat of a lot of the terrorism which goes out into the world, does need to be dealt with. It's not just that Afghanistan is in trouble, it's that it is creating trouble elsewhere. And that then implicates the relationship with Pakistan, and there are all sorts of things that get tied into this. There are other ways also of approaching terrorism. Often intelligence and police action and even education and economic assistance to remove the kind of incentives, if you will, that lead people sometimes to go ahead and engage in terrorism. I think all of that will be part of a comprehensive approach that he will take. But I don't I don't think anybody is going to say, oh, we don't have to worry about global terrorism. I think we do. I think the Obama administration will.
So the threat is still real and still there.
It's very real. But I think it will be done, again, differently. And going back to the point we were discussing a moment ago, I think in a more cooperative fashion, taking account of the knowledge as well as the views of other countries.
Yeah. Well, Alan, it's been roughly about 3 months after Mr. Obama's election. And it's been about a month after his inauguration. So my question is, how will he, lead his team of, rival in national security, particularly in national security issues, and lead this team of rivals and try to develop the foreign policy that you had just, stated for us?
He's made very clear that he will provide the direction for his administration. He will count on the talent that he's got in his cabinet, and I think it's a lot of them. Yeah. It's a tremendous amount of talent and a tremendous amount of political force, if you will, in that group. One could predict that, well, these are all ambitious people and they're all going to pursue their own ambition and agenda. I don't think so. And I also think that if they tend to, if any of them does, that person won't be around all that long. I think that Mr. Obama respects the views of others. He wants to hear it. He doesn't think he knows everything. But at the end of the day, he does make the decisions, and
the buck stops with him.
Well, the buck stops with him, and also he is going to set the tone and the direction of policy, so that even if it's not a decision that will lead to something happening tomorrow, for example, but will be a longer-term issue, he's the one at the end of the day who's going to say, this is what this administration is going to do. That's not being dictatorial. That's being, again, after having collected all of the views, including from these very talented people that he's got, and keep in mind there's going to be a whole slew of people under them that who one assumes will also share the wealth of talent and so on. He'll take that all into account and then make the best decision he can. Will he make mistakes? I'm sure he will. I think he's sure he will. But one also can learn from one's mistakes, and I think that the attitude going into this is a very positive and constructive one. So I think that if you read the book, The Team of Rivals, that people have referred to back in the Lincoln administration, I don't think it's quite the same thing.
No.
Yes, you have people in the administration working for Obama who did have presidential ambition.
Yes.
But I think that probably most of them anyway have given up that ambition, and I would not think that, as Lincoln did, at least in one case, that he would tolerate somebody trying to run a campaign against him from within the administration. And I don't think any of those people will do that.
Yeah. I agree with you on that assessment. And when we come back, we will continue our conversation with Mr. Alan Romberg. And we're going to talk about possibly the most important single bilateral relationship in the world today, and that is U.S.-China relations. We'll be right back.